Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, where we have the conversation that challenge fear-based narratives and invites us back into our self-trust, embodiment, and choice. I'm your host, Lauren Perlingy, and in today's episode is one of the many women deeply need, I feel like anyway. I'm honored to be joined by Isha. She works with supporting women, especially over 35, and reclaiming their nervous system safety and inner authority through their fertility journey. Rather than me sharing her story, I want to open up the space for her voice. Isha, I love to hear you about introduce yourself in your own words, who you are, the work that you do, and what led you to become a such powerful advocate for women's autonomy and emotional well-being and fertility.
Thank you, Lauren, for having me. Yeah, I feel like I am being called to pursue this message because I have, a very deep personal connection with it. So, for me, I am a women's fertility advocate, and because I strongly believe that every thought that we think and the way we go about living our lives and, our beliefs shape who we are. So my journey with fertility, when I had my first son, uh, my husband and I, we wanted to wait because, we had moved countries. I wanted to change career. I wanted to go to grad school. So we're like, we're doing things on our own timeline. We told our families and they're like, they used to bother us, but at the same time, they didn't really have much say because it's like, it's our life at the end. Anyway, I remember after I had my son, um, during one of my annual exams, I think he was around one. So the I was still kind of processing the whole, change in my life, with becoming a mom and dealing with a full-time job. So I remember having this conversation where my doctor was not really concerned about how I was doing as a first-time mom, but more like, hey, are you planning to have more kids? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am barely getting over the fact that I just had one and I'm like still kind of, our entire life revolves around the child and I'm like still coming up to speed with that. And I haven't even thought about, having a second one because I'm like barely functioning with the first. And the conversation, and I'm like, yeah, maybe at some point. I was just, I'm like, I don't know, like I'm not considering it seriously. She's like, well, you don't have a lot of time. And I'm like, I literally just sat there frozen. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't have time? I'm only 35. So it's that conversation, like I left her office feeling like so confused, like so disempowered, and like this fear hit me in the face. It's like, you really don't have a lot of time, so you should hurry up. And I feel like the day and age we live in, more and more women are choosing to prioritize their careers, their personal life, their financial freedom over having kids, which is, totally, I feel like their prerogative, right? But I feel like um, the medical industry, the doctors are still so hung up in that old adage of, well, if you're 30, over 35, you're going to run into problems. So me in my mission is to empower women to make choices at their own terms. It's their body, it's their life. Medical science may say something, and just because they say something doesn't mean that it's true for you. Because I feel like, I mean, if you look at it, more and more women are now dealing, starting their families. The statistics show, and I feel like more and more actually women are having kids over 40 and successful pregnancies, right? Healthy kids. So why are we still so hung up in this fear-based uh, message that, oh, if you're over 35, things are over essentially? I feel like these conversations need to shift from, that conversations that instill fear to like, whenever you decide, it's your decision and we support it. And, giving women resources and education, empowering them, like, There used to be a time when women would be encouraged to have kids before 35, but things have changed a lot. To have those conversations around focusing on your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. And whenever you think you're ready, we'll be here. And I feel like coming out of the conversation, like the way I did, feeling so unsupported and confused, and almost like with a lot of guilt and shame around, like I did something terribly wrong, to like, that choice is yours. We are here to support you. Whatever you decide, we are here. I feel like the two conversations have such a meaningful impact in the way the women leave that conversation. The one, like I said, made me feel like I'm a terrible person. Like, what am I doing? And I feel like my my message is more about, let's really think about the words that are coming out of our mouths and how they are impacting this future mom, to really shift that narrative from fear to faith. Your timing is your timing. We Just because medical science says this doesn't mean that it hasn't been proven wrong, or things haven't changed in last decade or so.
Yeah.
um, so I think the origin goes back to my own story and how I felt. And then also I feel like a big portion of my story is, when ultimately we got ready. And I remember, um, going to the doctor, and I'm like, I think we're ready. And he's like, well, you're 30, you're 38 or whatever. Um, it was funny what the doctor said. And by the way, I had already left the old practice, the practice, the lady, OBGYN, who had told me that I didn't have time. I was like, okay, time to find a new one. So I moved on. Like, if you cannot be on my party, on my side, and if you don't believe in my belief system, then it's okay. I'm sure there's more,
Right.
which I did. And the new doctor, when I went to see him, he's like, both of my daughters were born when my wife was like 40 and 41. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it it could be difficult. It could create more challenges. So
Sure.
somewhat supportive, but still not quite there. Anyway, I stuck with it. So I was like curious. I'm like, okay, so he's like, I would encourage you to try for a year. And if it doesn't happen, we're gonna have to like look into the why. And then, they put a label on you that you have infertility. And I hate using this word, by the way. So I try to not bring that up. Anyway, like, okay, so what are my options? Let's say if it doesn't happen within a year. Um, it's like, well, we're gonna have to run a whole bunch of tests, and it'll take about 4 to 6 months. Um, and like, what would be the conclusion? He's like, well, we would know if there are issues with you or your husband. And I'm like, what kind of issues? Like, well, if you are genetically compatible, so, your hormones, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, genetically compatible? Like, we have a child. Like, if
Right.
it, like, what changed all of a sudden in the last couple of years that we won't be compatible anymore. Anyway,
Yeah.
my intuition was not feeling like, I wasn't fully convinced with that answer. And that's another thing that I really want women who are listening to this episode to like hone in on. If your intuition is saying something, trust it.
Right.
It may be exactly the opposite of what the doctor is saying, but you will know why I'm saying this, as we go deeper into my story. But anyway, I stuck with my intuition. Like, I don't know if I'm behind that testing thing, because he doesn't sound too confident. He doesn't have a lot of logical reasons. And I'm like, yeah, I just feel like it's going to create more stress and anxiety for me, which is totally counterintuitive when you're trying to conceive, by the way. So I
Right.
was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I moved away with that conversation that, okay, well, let's keep trying. And I remember, uh, we tried for a couple months. I finally was pregnant again, but it didn't last. Like, I ended up miscarrying. And again, went back to the doctor and they're like, it's not your fault. It's very common. And it's like one of those things when they tell you it's not your fault, it just almost makes you, at least in my case, it's like,
Yeah.
uh, are you saying it's my fault?
Right.
So
Yeah.
my brain was like, it's totally your fault.
Yeah.
Just because he's saying this, it's like, whatever. And I just went into total problem solving mode. Like after that, I did not take time to grieve. I was like, it was like I was hit in the face with a brick. And I was just like, all that shame and guilt and everything just like came pouring down on me, along with the grief of losing. But I didn't like take time to deal with it. I was like, oh, we need to fix this. Because that's one thing about most women or most successful women. It's like we get into firefighting mode and we're like, I'm going to do this no matter what. And that's exactly how I dealt with it. Is that's all I had known all my life. I literally like, I'm like, okay, I don't think my OBGYN is of much help. Like he doesn't really have a lot of options, and I don't believe in taking medications just because. So I started looking at alternatives that I had. So I started like getting acupuncture, fertility massages. I started seeing a naturopath, blah, blah, blah. So it's just like you think of it, you name it, I was doing it. So much so, like I at one point had like multiple appointments scheduled during the week. And this went on for like 6, 7, 8 months. Um, Talk about, the desperation of having a child. Like I was, and then fighting that narrative of, oh, there must be something terribly wrong with me that this happened. Um, and just trying to bury that grief by keeping myself in this fight or flight mode of like, just, I'm going to make it happen. And I remember I had this moment where I was driving back home from one of the appointments. I was at a red signal. I was like, this thought just came to me. It was like, do you really think you can rush yourself into getting pregnant? Like, you're just creating more problems by driving yourself more and more out of like more and more out of harmony with your own body by, just not taking a breath and just like running constantly from one practitioner to the other, hoping that someone will fix you. And I don't know where that came from. It's probably my intuition, my higher self, or whatever you want to call it, talking to me. And that was just like, it was such a big aha moment that I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like, I'm done forcing this for me. Because I feel like the more you force it, the longer it takes. Because your body doesn't work with force, especially women's bodies. Anyway, long story short, um, although I did know that one thing that I could do overall, because along that time, I think that shame had, unbeknownst to me, taken over my entire life. Like I started eating where I put on like 15, 20 pounds. I was heaviest I had ever been all my life. And I think at the root of it all was this belief that I may have done something, and I was trying to fix it. Maybe I wasn't eating enough, or maybe I was in that, you know, I'm going to look a certain way. Looking a certain way was more important than nourishing my body to feel safe, to conceive. So that epiphany, that moment really changed, like, I think the entire course, because I was like, you know what? I'm going to work on myself. Like, I'm going to work on getting healthy where my body feels safe on its own to conceive. And I literally threw the timelines out the window. Um, and I did a lot of emotional work. Like, I think finally I let that grief just sit and breathe and just not run away from those really, really heavy feelings because it was there. It had to be processed and it came in waves. And it was okay. Like, but I was finally, letting that grief, processing that grief in its own time. So I remember like I started working out. I like really honed in on my diet, making sure I was prioritizing, mental health, taking care of myself and just like not from the perspective of, looking a certain way, but more like this needs to change. Like I need to feel my absolute best. And then, if the timing is right, if it's supposed to happen, it will. And then, you know, couple years went by, and I remember like I felt so like I felt this whole new lifestyle of like exercising and taking care of myself. I just started enjoying it so much that conceiving was like not even on my mind anymore. Like I fell in love with this new person that, that I was becoming. And I was like, wow, I really like this new side of me who's like so focused on, I would take long walks and that would really help calm me down. I started sleeping through the night. My hormones started, coming back in place. So I was like, wow, this is really working. And I think to me, it was like, okay, and I had so much energy, and it was like I I wasn't losing my mind over like the smallest of things that my son would do. And I think to me that was like, wow, this was the whole point, ultimately. And then, somewhere down in the back of my head, there was still this time thing of, yeah, I do want to have a second child. Um, so 2 years ago, when I unexpectedly lost my job, again, I went back to that force mode where, I was applying for like hundreds of jobs every week and nothing was happening. And then, one day when I was just sitting with myself having a moment, this thought struck me. That was exactly what you were doing, you know, with your TTC journey. And that's exactly what you're doing now. Like you're trying to force the outcome. And that just got me really interested in how the way we do things are, run by our underlying beliefs, unbeknownst to us. And I remember like getting really motivated and inspired to like read a lot of self-help books about mind and body connection and how the thoughts you think, the thoughts, and the emotions you feel ultimately shape your life. Um, and started working, especially with my, how I was feeling. The feelings were the same. Like again, that shame and guilt came haunting me, because I'm like, it's been 8 months since I have been looking for a job. Nothing has happened. Why? So I felt like the emotions that were coming up were very, very similar to the ones that had come up a couple years ago when I had miscarried. So I had to ultimately admit that I need help. So I partnered with a coach who helped me understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And the whole journey started unfolding where, like, I really need to work on my belief system and my emotions because these emotions are not helping me. Anyway, long story short, this journey or that journey led me to just like go deeper and deeper into learning about nervous system and how our bodies are, wired to keep us safe, and just how your subconscious mind rules it all. Your subconscious mind is like so powerful, and it's like what is the kind of fuel that you are feeding it? If you are feeding it negative thoughts, it's going to say yes. It's like very, very objective. So I was feeding my subconscious mind a lot of BS, and I was believing it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why can't I feed my subconscious mind things that are going to work in my favor? Read a lot of books about how, our subconscious works, and just started really diving deep into that. Took a lot of um, coaching classes, signed up for courses that really helped me get an understanding of why, I was feeling the way I was feeling. And, you know, it had been a year and a half into that journey of like my job. And I was like finally coming to terms that after I had done that work and worked on my beliefs, I was like, do I really want a job? Like, do I really want to go back to a 9 to 5 setting? Because I'm also thinking about having another child. How is that going to look? Like, how is my life going to look? And just because I was made to believe that having a job is like a source of stable income,
Right.
that clearly is a myth. It clearly isn't true. So, what kind of life do I really want for myself and my family? Because I feel like the life that I had been living, it wasn't chosen by me. It was chosen by my family or like the culture or the society. It was like the conditioning.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? I would like to create a life where I am setting my own time to work, where I decide how much I want to work, how much, like, I'm not limited by the number of hours. I'm not limited by, if I'm working more, I can make more money. And my work revolves around my family and not the other way around, like it had been all these years.
Right.
And I really started working on my mindset around my job. And I'm like, I don't think I need a job. I think I want to do something that I want to inspire women. And I wasn't quite sure how, but like this is the journey that was unfolding. I think it's finally like come like I think I'm having a full awakening moment where I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I know now how am I going to be supporting women. Anyway, um, I think for me, once I started really peeling the layers of the onions of like my subconscious belief system, one day I was like, wait a minute. I had this aha moment where it's like, have you noticed a pattern? I was talking to myself. I have a lot of those thoughts.
Don't we
Like
all?
you've always put your career or other things before getting pregnant, like over getting pregnant. I'm like, why is that? And then I really was like curious about how I was going about thinking about things. And then I had this realization, like somewhere down, I may have held on to a belief that, whoa, if you're gonna start a new job, like it was the original plan, and have a baby, how are the two gonna work together? A newborn needs a lot of commitment and time and energy. You're not going to be able to successfully, um, do both. And for you to be able to provide for your growing family, you better have a job. So it was like this belief, and my body was like, oh, yeah, it's not safe to have a child for sure because you don't have a job. You're not going to have enough, money. And so my body was like, sure enough, we had been trying for almost a year and a half and it wasn't working. Or actually, at that point, on and off for almost, 3, 4 years. Um, so I really started, going deeper into those beliefs and really re rethinking them or rewiring them. So every belief in our brain is like wired, like we literally have connections in our brain for every thought that we think, right? So every time you decide to stop thinking a certain way, your body then actively works on breaking that connection and forming a new connection. And every connection in the brain has a physiological impact in your body. So for me, just having that huge realization and then using the techniques that I learned, I really worked on myself where I'm like, no, I feel safe. I feel safe enough to, you know, if like now is the best time. There's no better time than now. So I like really started reprogramming my mind to believe that everything is fine, we're safe to conceive. And then um a couple months after that, of course, I was able to conceive. And I think for me, another big piece of the subconscious belief that may have been blocking me from getting pregnant. It was the birth of my first one. There were some unpleasant memories associated with that birth in the hospital.
Mm.
And I remember, after my son was born and we came home, like 3, 4 months after that, I had like friends come over and they were like, "So how was it? Like, how are you feeling?" I'm like, "I'm so tired. Like I don't think I can ever think, like, I can't even think about having a second one. I think I'm done. I'm done." And again, your subconscious mind is like, "Yeah, you're done. No matter, like, it was so painful."
Right.
So it was again like combination of having these realizations where, like, yeah, my subconscious mind and my body were like trying to work for me all these years. Like they were trying to make, like, they were doing their best to keep me safe, because somehow I had told myself that getting pregnant was not safe for me. And once those belief systems shifted, of course, I conceived right away. I'm more than halfway through my pregnancy right now. So, I don't want to paint a false picture for anybody, but what I'm trying to say is on and off trying for almost 5 years, and it's finally happening. And now I'm over 40. Like I got pregnant at 41. From, coming from that fear-based mindset of if I don't do it right away, which was totally counterintuitive to my journey, to like having this absolute faith where it's gonna happen, because my intuition was right on point that it is going to happen. And somewhere I was getting the inclination that IVF was not for us. Like it just wasn't an option for me. And I just trusted it. Like I didn't question it. Um, I definitely had moments where I would doubt, because I'm human too.
Right.
But I think for me, I really established this two-way communication channel with the universe, where I remember this one moment where I was like, am I really supposed to be a mom to two kids? Like I was really questioning it. And
Mhm.
I'm like, universe, give me a sign. Like give me a sign that it's supposed to happen. And I'm like, I asked for like a peacock as a sign out of all the things. I don't know. And a couple hours later, I'm like, my husband's like, okay, let's go get dinner. And I'm like, okay, well, let me get changed. And I'm like, I change, I put a pair of shorts on, and then we're like driving to the restaurant. And I like look down at my shorts and I'm like, wait, are those peacocks on my shorts? Like I hadn't worn them in forever. And I almost didn't want to believe it. And I'm like, it was like asking my question, like my husband, I'm like, hey, what is this thing? What is this bird on my shorts? It's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what does it look like to you? He's like, it's a peacock to me. And I'm like my sign was right there.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was literally seeing like peacocks everywhere I would go, everywhere. Like, gentle wings from the universe. It was like, it- yes, it's supposed to happen for me. So I'm sharing this because I know, we are humans, and for us, the proof is in the pudding. And I think for me, this whole journey was about really trusting myself, trusting in the divine timing, and really building that faith in the universe. Um, and anytime that doubt came back, or that fear kind of trickled in, just not running away from it, but really getting curious about it. And I feel like through my own journey, I really want to uh, inspire women, because I feel like our beliefs, are huge with anything that we do, with especially when it comes to like sicknesses, illnesses, or dealing with the doctors, because our logical mind is automatically on board anytime a doctor says something. Oh yeah, this condition is irreversible. And your subconscious brain is like, oh shoot, like I'm gonna have to live with this the rest of my life. um and I've had that, um during COVID. Uh I came down with vertigo and panic attacks out of nowhere. And there's no cure for vertigo. It's pretty clear. Once you have it, you're gonna have to deal with it for the rest of your life. But I overcame that. also.
Right.
Why? Because I've never settled with just because a doctor is saying something, like that's my destiny. Like I think for us as humans, it's like we think that we are at the receiving end of life. Like we have absolutely no say in how the life is happening for us. But in reality, it's exactly the opposite. At least that's my belief. We're
Yeah.
co-creating every moment, you know, with every decision that we make, a future that we either love or hate. So it's like, if you think about it, like the life that you're living today, your past self, your 20-year-old self, 30-year-old self, envision this current life at some point and you're living it, right? So what makes you question that you can't create a life that you desire now at some point in future? Um, so I think anytime us as humans we get a medical diagnosis, that becomes the end all and be all. And my message to everyone listening is that's not the case. It's just, how if you can train your brain to be in the future than in the past, through the kind of thoughts uh, you are thinking, you can totally change the outcome. So my work is not to like, bash the medical community, but I think the message needs to change from fear to empowerment, from, shame and guilt to trust. And nobody sets that timeline but our bodies, especially
Right.
women's bodies, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a long-winded way of saying like who I am and why am I so passionate about doing this.
No, I truly believe that like everything, it was like every question that I was going to ask, you literally just kind of answered it in the way that I was going to ask you. So thank you for that. And I think this conversation is very powerful. And I think it speaks to women with so much compassion and clarity and truth, like reminding everybody, regardless of, not everybody, but like reminding women that fertility isn't about something that's rushed or forced and feared. And you're just a living example of, through your testimony and through your story, that this is something that the way that you approach it from like self trust or nervous system or
Yeah,
safety or all of them together. Obviously, you have to have all of
right.
them together with deep respect for our bodies and choices. So, can you tell the listeners where they can find you if they are really resonating with the story and where they can, yeah, where they can find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I am certainly active on Instagram, the fertility voice with a period in between the and fertility. I am the vision that I have, because this is literally like I am rebranding the whole thing, the original idea. Because again, it was also about helping women, but I feel like the way my journey has unfolded and the way, you know, um, th- I think there's a reason why I'm having this inkling that this is it. Like this is my purpose, because I think the season of life also I am in. I think my goal is to like invite people from the industry, like other women who have been in similar shoes, maybe even like, you know, uh, doctors and, other practitioners who are approaching this with a more holistic perspective. It's not just your age, but it's like, your entire health that ultimately decides whichever path you want to pursue. And just create like this array of resources, having conversations like you and I are having right now with, these people where the women can listen in and just feel empowered and motivated um, and not like they've run out of choices. So that's my goal. Um, yeah, I am. If anybody is listening and they want to connect with me, of course, they have the link to my Instagram account. I am really inspired to help as many women as possible because I know the way women feel about their fertility, it trickles in every area of our life because I know it did for me. Um, and we start judging ourselves more than anybody else around us. And I think the support that I lacked, I want to be that support for other women, that
Yeah.
support system, that friend or that person that I could talk to about how I was feeling. Um, because, as much as I love my husband and, we have a great relationship, he just was like at loss of words of like what to tell me some days when I was
Yeah.
in that moment of grief. He was grieving too because he had lost a child, but at the same time, it was like
Yeah.
he didn't know how to support me.
Right.
He was there for me anytime I wanted to like vent or I was crying, he would, I would have his shoulder, but that's about it. So I feel like as women, and that's another thing I want to challenge is like enough competition, enough you versus me. I think it's time that we as women come together and really
Absolutely.
support each other in our own ways. Because that competitive thing needs to be, said goodbye to, because that's what we've operated or learned or been conditioned to believe as
Yeah.
little girls. But I think times are changing. It's time to like hold hands and, do this journey together
Yeah.
versus competing.
Yeah. 100%. So, everybody listening, and if this episode stirred something in you and you feel seen, validated, or maybe even challenged in a really good way, I invite you to go make sure you go check out her link below. If you're listening to this in the show notes, or if you're watching us over on YouTube, then make sure you check out her links below in the description box. And I've also created a space called the Enlightened Misfits podcast. That's what we're on right now. Misfits Sisterhood, a grounded, supportive community, just like what she was literally just talking about for women. Because I see the vision too for women to stop outside sourcing their energy and ready to come back into alignment with their bodies, their intuition, and their truth. So inside the sisterhood, we explore all these conversations that we talk about on the podcast as well through live calls, embodiment practices, and nervous system awareness guides. So it's just real, honest conversations with women walking similar paths. So that link to join is below, also in the show notes or in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's very needed and very, very important. And thank you all for listening and being here with us. I hope you decide to choose you or continue to choose you if you've already chose you. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next week.